All right, so you guys sent in a whole bunch of articles all about these budget cuts happening at universities over in the UK.
Yeah.
And it's pretty serious stuff, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
things are getting really rough over there, it seems like.
Absolutely.
We're talking people losing their jobs,
Yeah.
entire programs shutting down. Like, it's a full-blown crisis.
It is.
Yeah. So we're going to be looking at some excerpts, mainly from this University World News article,
Okay.
to like really dive into all this and figure out what's going on.
Sounds good.
So,
Yeah, and it's not even just like a few universities that are struggling, right?
right.
We're talking about like big, prestigious institutions like
Yeah.
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh,
Yeah.
your alma mater.
Exactly.
And they're projecting some massive deficits.
Really?
Like, we're talking about a potential £100 million shortfall.
100 million.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
It's a lot.
That's a lot of money.
Huge.
Yeah, so like what ripple effects are we even looking at here
Yeah.
with that kind of deficit? Well, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
universities are already under a lot of pressure these days from like, rising costs everywhere.
Yeah.
You know,
Of
inflation,
course.
utility bills going through the roof,
Oh, yeah.
changes to the national insurance contributions.
Mhm.
And all this is happening while their funding is staying the same.
Oh, wow.
So,
So they're really getting squeezed
yeah, they're being squeezed from every direction.
from all sides.
It's rough.
And I know that international student applications are like a huge source of income for UK universities.
Right.
So what's happening there?
So those have actually been going down lately,
Oh, really?
which just adds to the whole problem.
Oh, wow.
Because those international student fees
Right.
often help to cover the cost of education for the students in the UK.
Oh, so fewer international students means less funding for everyone.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And this actually brings us to a really interesting situation that's going on in Scotland right now.
Okay.
They have this policy of free tuition for all Scottish students,
Okay.
which sounds amazing.
Yeah, in theory.
Right.
Sounds great.
But it puts a ton of pressure on university budgets.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because someone has to pay for it.
Right. Someone's got to fit the bill.
Exactly.
So is there any talk of like changing that policy at all?
Well, it's a really tricky thing politically.
Yeah.
You know, politicians don't really want to touch that free tuition policy
Yeah, I get it.
because people would be really upset if they lost that.
Yeah, for sure.
So they're kind of stuck.
Okay, so what are universities doing then to deal with all of this financial pressure?
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
we're seeing lots of job cuts.
Well, no, the articles mentioned that.
Yeah, all across the higher education sector in the UK.
Yeah.
They've already announced over 1,000 jobs being cut in just the past few weeks.
1,000 jobs.
Yeah,
Wow, that's heartbreaking.
it's a lot of people.
Yeah. So are these cuts like across the board, or are certain departments being hit harder?
It really depends on the university.
Yep.
But we are seeing pretty significant cuts to programs like nursing,
Okay.
languages,
Mm-hmm.
even music.
Wow.
It's kind of all over the place.
So these are like vital fields of study that are getting impacted by this.
Yeah, and it's starting to feel like this domino effect
Right.
where the lack of funding
Yeah.
leads to job cuts,
Mm-hmm.
which then impacts the programs they offer.
Right. And then what about the quality of education,
Right.
Is that going to suffer too?
That's a big concern for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, resources are already stretched thin,
Right.
and more cuts are just going to make it worse.
Yeah, imagine like labs with outdated equipment,
Yeah, Yeah,
like
exactly.
larger classes,
exactly.
less one-on-one support for students.
Right.
It's not a recipe for like academic excellence.
No, it's not.
Right. And I imagine this will have an impact on research too, right?
Absolutely.
Cutting-edge research needs millions in funding,
Right.
and that might be at risk now.
But research is super important for any good university system.
Right.
It drives progress, it
Right.
attracts talented people, it helps the economy,
Absolutely.
but it's also expensive.
Yeah.
And when budgets are tight,
Yeah.
research is usually one of the first things to get cut.
So are we potentially looking at a brain drain situation?
It's possible
Yeah.
where like top researchers and academics just leave the UK
Right.
and go to other countries that have more funding.
Right.
Yeah,
And that could have some serious long-term consequences
absolutely.
for the UK's standing in research and innovation.
Yeah.
So this whole situation, it kind of feels like
Mhm.
using a nation's strategic oil reserves
Right.
that are meant for like a crisis to cover like your daily expenses.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It might work for a little while,
Right.
but eventually you're going to hit a wall.
Yeah. You can't keep doing that
Yep.
forever.
And the articles did mention that universities are being urged to tap into their reserves
Yeah.
to try to cushion the blow.
They are. But a lot of people are saying that that's not really a solution.
Yeah,
It's just a temporary fix.
right.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a much bigger problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what are the potential long-term solutions that people are talking about?
Well, some people think that tuition fees should be allowed to rise with inflation
Okay.
instead of just having these one-time increases.
Right.
That would give universities a more predictable income.
Mm-hmm.
But, of course, that raises concerns about affordability for students,
Of course.
right? So,
So how do you balance, increasing tuition
yeah,
with the goal of making higher education accessible to everyone?
right.
It's like a classic dilemma.
It is.
So what other ideas are people talking about?
Well, there's a growing movement that wants to completely overhaul how higher education is funded in the UK.
Wow, like a total system reboot.
Yeah,
That's a big idea.
it is.
Yeah.
It would be a huge undertaking,
Yeah.
but a lot of people think it's necessary
Yeah.
if they want to save higher education in the UK.
Mhm.
This crisis has kind of forced everyone to have this conversation about funding
Yeah.
and what's really important.
Yeah.
Totally.
Which is good.
And speaking of like priorities,
Yeah.
the articles mentioned this decline in applications from international students.
Right.
So is this just a UK thing, or are other countries seeing this too?
That's a good question, actually. It's not just the UK.
Okay.
A lot of countries are having trouble attracting international students these days.
Really?
Yeah, there are a bunch of reasons why.
Okay.
Like, tuition costs are going up everywhere.
Right.
There's more competition from other countries,
Oh, yeah.
and even the political climate in some places can make a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's kind of complicated.
Yeah, it's like this whole web of global factors.
Exactly.
So specifically for the UK, what are some of the reasons behind this decline?
Well, Brexit definitely hasn't helped.
Right.
The UK leaving the EU
Yeah.
has made things uncertain for students from the EU
Mm-hmm.
because they used to have the same benefits as UK students.
Right. And now they don't.
Right.
And there are also worries about getting work visas after they graduate
Yeah.
and whether international students are even welcome in the UK anymore.
Wow. So it sounds like the UK is losing its edge a bit.
Yeah, kind of.
What can they do to get those students back?
Well, they could make it easier to get visas.
Okay.
They could offer more scholarships for international students.
Mm-hmm.
And they need to show off all the great things about studying in the UK.
Right. Like remind everyone why it's such a cool place to go to school.
Exactly.
It seems like marketing and perception are a big deal.
Totally. They need to showcase their amazing universities,
Mm-hmm.
talk about their diverse student body,
Right.
and highlight their awesome culture.
Yeah.
And they need to do it in a way that appeals to people from all over the world.
Yeah.
It's a global market.
It is. So this whole deep dive into budget cuts has taken us on quite a journey,
It has.
from financial problems to international student stuff. It's fascinating how everything is connected.
It really is. You can't talk about one thing without talking about the other.
Exactly. So it's not just about numbers on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
It's about the future of higher education in the UK.
Absolutely.
Its role in research and innovation,
Mm-hmm.
and its ability to attract smart people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we go too far down that road, let's
Yeah.
bring it back to our listeners.
Okay.
You've been following this issue really closely.
I have.
What do you find most concerning about this whole crisis?
Honestly, it's the long-term impact on the quality of education
Okay,
and the research that comes out of these universities.
right.
The UK has always been known for its amazing academics.
Mm-hmm.
But if these money problems keep happening,
Yeah.
we could lose that.
We could lose that reputation.
Yeah, and fall behind other countries.
Wow. So we've talked about the problems.
Yeah.
Now let's focus on solutions.
Okay.
We mentioned raising tuition fees,
Right.
but that's not really ideal. So what about other funding models?
Right.
What are some of the ideas out there?
Well, some people are suggesting more government funding.
Okay.
Others are looking at partnerships with private investors.
Okay.
And some universities are even trying things like income share agreements.
Oh, I've heard of those.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Basically, students agree to pay back a percentage of their salary
All right.
after they graduate,
Okay.
but only once they're making a certain amount of money.
So it's like shifting the risk away from students
Exactly.
who might not want to take out huge loans
Right.
and putting it more on the universities.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's a way to make sure everyone has the same goals,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a new idea.
Yeah,
And there are still a lot of details to figure out.
for sure. It sounds like there's no easy answer.
There isn't.
This is going to take a lot of creativity
Mm-hmm.
and a willingness to change how we think about funding higher education.
Absolutely.
And this is something that's happening all over the world.
Yeah, this isn't just a UK problem.
Right.
Lots of countries are dealing with this.
It's a global trend.
It is.
We all need to be paying attention to this.
We do.
And thinking about what we can do to help.
It's important.
So if you were in charge of higher education policy,
Okay.
how would you balance making education affordable
Right.
with keeping universities financially stable?
That is the million-dollar question.
It is.
There are no easy answers.
No,
But these are the kinds of tough questions we need to be asking.
absolutely.
It is a tough one, but yeah, these are the conversations we need to be having.
Yeah,
If we want to find solutions that actually work.
right. So let's kind of step back for a second
Okay.
and summarize what we've learned from this whole deep dive.
Yeah.
We started with these headlines
Right?
about all these budget cuts at
Mm.
UK universities,
Yeah.
and we quickly realized that this is so much bigger than just a few universities struggling.
Right. It's a systemic problem.
Yeah, exactly.
The whole system is kind of under pressure.
Yeah, and we saw how rising costs
Yeah.
and stagnant funding
Mhm.
and this decline in international students,
Right.
it's created this like perfect storm for these UK universities.
It really has.
And it's led to some pretty drastic measures.
Absolutely.
Job cuts,
Yeah.
programs closing,
Mm.
even talks about raising tuition fees.
Right.
And then we talked about Scotland,
Yeah.
with their free tuition policy,
Mm.
and how that adds this whole other layer of complexity
For sure.
to the funding challenges.
It does.
And then we zoomed out
Yeah.
and looked at the global picture
Right.
and realized that a lot of countries are facing these same pressures.
It's a global issue.
When it comes to funding higher education,
It is.
it's a real wake-up call, I think, for
Strong.
all of us to
Yeah.
pay attention to the financial health of our higher education system.
Yeah, we can't just assume that everything's fine.
Exactly. We can't take these institutions for granted.
Right. They're so important
Yeah, they're vital.
for research, for innovation, for social mobility.
Or everything,
Yeah. But they need our support.
if they're going to thrive.
Absolutely.
So as you continue to follow this issue, and I really encourage you
Mhm.
to think about those potential solutions we talked about.
Right.
Think about the pros and cons of raising tuition.
Mm.
Explore those alternative funding models.
Yeah.
And ask yourself what role the government should play.
Right.
What role should private institutions play?
Yeah, these are questions for everyone.
Yeah, these aren't just questions for policymakers. These
No.
are questions for all of us.
Absolutely. The future of higher education depends on us.
Yeah, being engaged
Mhm.
and informed.
Staying curious and continuing to learn.
And on that note,
Yeah.
we're going to wrap up this deep dive.
It's been a good one.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Until next time.